It was a soul connection.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I always like to teach the young kids too, is why sexual, like why have sex? Why wait till you get married, right?
Yes.
Because that's how souls are intertwined. It's not the saying I do that intertwines your soul. It is sex.
Alrighty, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Champion Life podcast. I'm your host, Curt Tucker, and you're right, I have a guest today with me, my beautiful wife, Rachel. We are in our new studio, and I want to have a conversation with you guys today about what?
Let's talk about sex.
Let's go. So anyhow, if you remember in one of our first episodes that Rachel and I did together, one of the things that we talked about was, the 3 P's, and we didn't get to the third P. So the first one was prayer. How do you take your marriage to the next level, friends? And so this is going to be an episode really based upon marriage and some of the things that we found that has really helped us over 18 years now, almost, of marriage. Can you believe that? Go next level. And there's been some trials for those of you guys who know our story, and we'll plug some of our story into this episode. But we talked about prayer, we talked about priority, and then one of the big ones is purity. And purity when it comes to your sex life. And there's some things that we did that we would tell you not to do. But today we want to talk about sex, and we want to talk about boundaries as well, and some lessons that we've learned over the last couple weeks. So, real quick, honey, welcome to the show.
Thanks
so
for having
awesome
me.
to have you. My goal is to have Rachel be a part of this every 3 or 4 episodes, because we talk a lot about life, marriage, business, the 5 F's, as I like to call it: faith, family, fitness, finances, and fun. And so real quick, how you doing?
Well, first I want to say I'm super stoked that you're in this spot, because this has been like a vision, and he said something about, oh, we'll do it next time. I'm like, no, today is the best day. No better day than today.
That's right.
Than to set this up. So I am super stoked to be here. This is a monumental day.
Come on.
When your vision becomes your view, right?
That's right.
So
That's
I'm amazing. I feel great.
awesome.
And I think it has a lot to do with what we're about to talk about.
So we'll set the tone right now. We want to talk to you guys about 3 ways today that you can begin into your relationship, into your marriage, to be able to create more intimacy, right? And ultimately more sex. And so one of the things that I want to talk
Not
about...
necessarily the same thing.
That's right. So, let's talk about the 3 levels of intimacy. Go ahead, babe.
So there has to be an emotional, like a spiritual connection first, right? And then there becomes the emotional connection. And I think for me, just seeing it play out in our lives and how and who we've become, because when we met, our foundation was very shaky, and it was on a very small, it was the physical
attraction.
Yeah. And it's like
A lot of lust.
And you can't build on that. And so now when we have Jesus as our foundation now, like we actually just went through a little bit of a storm, but it was to break some things off of us, and to kind of force us to level up. And I think that's what really happened, and how the other thing we're going to talk about kind of came into play. But what were we just talking about? Look, it just fell in my head.
Yeah, so basically when we talk about the 3 levels of intimacy.
Yes, so the emotional part, like for me personally, thank you for bringing that back.
Yeah.
That was it for me. Like I need, although I never realized I needed it, but growing myself and realizing some things about myself, that I do need that emotional, I need to open myself up to that, to be vulnerable to that, so that I can be, intimacy is into me, you see, and letting each other in at that level. Because I just want to say this, like, so my son, Carson, has his first girlfriend, and he's 18 years old, and he's very committed to purity, and he's just a pure kid. And to watch those two interact, we took him to dinner, and you went to the bathroom, and it's just me and these 2 kids, and I was not even there. They were just lost in each other. like spiritually and emotionally, and it has nothing to do with the physical thing. Like that is the goal, I think, in order to reach that third level of the actual act of
Yeah.
sex.
So if you're thinking about it from this perspective, men, or in your marriage, and maybe you're struggling right now in this department. And one of the things that I like to talk about when I work with entrepreneurs, or we talk about, how do we have more success? Well, first of all, we have to define success, but in any relationship, for a lot of my brothers out there, we constantly think about sex. Like, there's a book called Think and Grow Rich that I read early in my entrepreneur career when I was like 19, so 20 however many years ago, 22 years ago. The chapter was actually called The Power of Sex Transmutation. And basically the basis of the chapter was that when we can begin to start understanding the power of sex, how it dominates our mind, and we can begin to transfer that energy into other things, i.e. business, we can really create success. But the reality is it's still there. It's dominant. One of the things that, Rachel will say, about me is what? I'm easy. What do I need?
Yeah, sex and food.
Sex and food.
It's like shark.
It's like a shark, right? And so let's be real that, if you're struggling in your marriage, okay, as we, coach couples and we talk about these things, this is one of the things that, that has to be talked about, that nobody talks about, that a pastor really can't preach from the pulpit, or at least maybe I believe we should talk about this more. I've even heard my pastor talk about when he does premarital, counseling, he'll say, okay, hopefully that you haven't had sex yet and you're saving that for marriage. But ideally, when you get married, how often do you plan on having sex? And that's an important question to ask, because, you might have two different people coming where in one family, they never even have talked about sex, right? Like they don't even know that their parents have sex, or maybe their parents aren't having sex. And then you have one person that comes from a family where it was talked about, right? Like our kids know that we have sex, like they know when the door is closed. Okay, that means, because that's healthy, because God created sex for marriage, and it is an important part of having a thriving marriage. And so one of the things that, I am going to position in this podcast, and we're going to talk a little bit deeper about how to make this work, though, is how do you have more sex in your marriage? And, in almost calling a sex challenge, because one of the things that I said to you a couple weeks ago is we were going through and setting some new boundaries, if you will, is that, hey, I would like to have more sex. It's not the first and most important thing to me as much as words of affirmation are, but we know that it does create attraction. And I think that anything that is connection as well, anything that's worth doing, that's good for you, you should do it more often. And so what did I propose?
That's part of the scroll one. He goes, when it becomes a pleasure to do something, it becomes a pleasure to do it often.
Yes.
Look at that.
And so if you think about, anything that's worth doing is worth doing consistently, right? Anything that's going to give you a great result, anything that's going to add value to your life, to your marriage, to your business. I just want to say this though, before we move on to that, because I just always like to plug knowledge into places, because I know people don't know what they don't know. So you're talking about that sex transmutation thing, right? And what happens, and so then you have to be careful, friends, if you of all these counterfeit things will come. So you'll find videos on YouTube of how to masturbate and sex transmutation to achieve your dreams. Like, don't do that. Yes. Yeah.
Don't do that. So I just needed to say that.
Keep the purity of your marriage, and if you want more to go deeper, grab my book, The Champion Life Playbook, where I go very deep into our story on how we didn't get the purity thing right.
No.
We came from a very lustful background, right? We talk about the fatherlessness. We talk about, for those of you guys who know our story in a 30-second nutshell, we both were two broken people broke, busted, and disgusted, as we like to say, coming from two fatherlessness backgrounds, no
Hungry for
leadership,
love, but filling it with
lust.
temporary things.
Yes. And so that led to us in our early years, me being a sex addict, infidelity, bankruptcy, abuse, adultery, the whole 9 yards. Really, all those things positioned us very well today to do what we love to do, which is mentor couples, marriages, businesses, things of that nature. All those things that we had to go through, or I should say grow through, to help us get where we're at today. And so I want to just kind of ask.
I want to talk about the last 13 days.
So the last 13 days, we talked about implementing some boundaries. And so I want to encourage you, to read Boundaries in Marriage as
Dr.
a couple.
Henry Cloud and Dr. John Thompson.
And I'll be real with you, men especially, I didn't want to read the book. I think, there was some things in our marriage where we have a lot going on in this season right now with the launch of my book, podcast, multiple businesses. You're very involved in your ministry, Women at the Well. And it can be so easy to begin to start to start going in a different direction and not realizing. And we had a friend who said, hey, listen, at the end of the day, your marriage comes first, before the 3 businesses, before the ministry, before the kids. And so I just want to hunker there for a foundation moment of, if you're not putting your marriage first, friends, and you're listening to this podcast right now, can I encourage you to start there? Okay. Other than your relationship with God, and having that time together, ask yourself the question, and you have to be truthful and honest. Am I putting my marriage first? Do I know how I love my spouse, or how she feels loved, or how he feels loved, or whatever? Because the reality is, if that's not there, then there's pretty good guess that sex isn't there, right? You know what I mean? Because, the other forms of intimacy, spiritual and emotional, are going to need to come before the physical intimacy. So the last 13 days, we decided that we were going to read this book together called Boundaries in Marriage, right?
Well, we decided that we were going to take care of the holes in our wall and fix it and level up. And so that spurred on just, I think, for grace to flow, I think, and just for things to really open up inside of me. And so, like, for me, I'm the one, like, I'm the it was like, you came home from Montana like on a Thursday, and like we had sex 3 times within 24 hours, and then it's about every 12 hours.
We're not going to go too deep here, honey.
But I remember, like, I think it was 2 days ago, I remember looking at you after we were done. I'm like, this has to be so good for because, and it's like, and it's not, what's crazy is it's, we always say it doesn't have to be a longie, but they've all been pretty long.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure there's been some calories burnt there. And there's times where Curt just is like,
okay. Moving on. Okay.
But it's so, like, that's the thing. It's like, I remember
it's healthy. It's invigorating.
One point, though, like in the last couple of days, just looking at you in the eyes and just be so soul connected with you. Like, just, it was a moment that, like, it was a soul connection.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I always like to teach the young kids too, is why have sex? Why wait till you get married, right?
Yes. Because
that's how souls are intertwined. It's not the saying I do that intertwines your soul. It is sex. And so, like, so for us, I felt that connection. And then also I had lunch with a friend yesterday, Robin, and she was like, I don't know what's going on. She goes, but you just seem so, like, I'm like, well,
let's talk about that. So
speaking of,
what's crazy is that, I wanted to talk about this with our audience because, life, marriage, and business is the 3 pillars, of this podcast. And this is something, once again, when it comes to a marriage, that people don't talk about. And, we know the struggles that it's created in our marriage in the past, and so many people that we talk about
attached to sex. It's
Mm.
not shame. It's in the confines of marriage. And I think this is why Carson, like he's probably gonna be married next year. But it's like, in the confines of the marriage, it's a beautiful whatever, exploration. And so now I'm like coming back. It's almost like I don't think I've ever experienced what I'm experiencing now because of all the years of just dysfunction and healing and then how I grew up to where now it's like
It's
I think
pure.
your body is a wonderland just like came to my mind to where it's like I'm not
Mm.
in the place of let's just get this done and we
Sure.
can go to sleep, but like let's have some fun. Like
Let's
let's
yeah.
get some oxytocin flowing and everything and live really long lives.
So for the wives out there,
Yeah.
what would you say would be maybe one or two things to the women who are listening to this that are married, and it's like I'm not there. I'm not feeling it.
Mhm.
That would maybe be one or two things that from a mindset shift, because I believe that everything starts in our mindset, everything starts in our thoughts.
Mhm.
You may not like your husband right now, right? We're called to love, but not always like. But I love what the scripture says: do not withhold. Like, especially in a marriage, we know that the lack of sex creates a lot of issues. So what would you say to a wife who's maybe struggling right now in this department, that could be one or two things pretty quickly that could maybe begin to get her more into, I'm going to talk to you men here in a second,
Yeah.
but for you, for the
Well,
wife.
first of all, you have to like, is it situational? You just like, you guys are just not getting along and that's the last thing you want to do. Is your hormones messed up? Like, so I got my hormones fixed. I got bioidentical therapy, which is amazing. I highly recommend you at least getting them checked. And then the third thing is this, is here's what I know in being a coach and mentoring couples for years is, ladies, he cannot read your mind. So whatever you got stewing up in your head, like just tell your husband. Like, so
Mm,
for us, like communication is such a huge thing. Like stop like assuming, I know this. My husband is that person. Like he will da 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 and then stuff will come out of his mouth. I'm like, well, can you start over with the beginning of the sentence that started in your head? Like, and not to be rude, but just like you don't realize, like, sometimes the stuff up here is not coming out and your husband cannot read your mind. So when you can just like, so what we did here recently is,
mm,
we just had it out. Like we just laid everything on the table. I'm not happy with the way this is going and we need to fix it, and just tell him, because I promise you that he probably lives in his own little world of my life is great
yeah.
because he doesn't know.
And for the men, and this goes both
Yeah,
ways,
same.
is there's got to be a place of what we would call safe talk, right?
Yeah.
Where your spouse should be the safest person that you can share anything with, right? That men, your wife should be able to come to you. Okay, and timing is important. We know that. Tone is important as well. But to be able to come and to say,
So not right before you go to bed or right before
exactly,
you
or
should
not
be
after he walks in
having
the
sex
door,
or
after,
yeah, right.
a long day of work, or after she's been dealing with the kids or whatever. But there should be this safe talk, space. And we'll talk about that on a different episode. But one of the things that we have implemented into our marriage that's been pretty amazing is just to be able to share the story in our head, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like you just said, like we think we know what the other person is thinking, or we're assuming, which can create all kinds of
Don't assume
problems,
anything. That part.
right? Because many times we naturally assume the worst case scenario, right? Versus being able to just say to the other person, hey, can I just share with you what's on my heart, what's on my mind in a safe place? And that's been huge for us.
That's been the that's been the thing I think that has just opened me up to be vulnerable to you and just to completely let go of everything
Mm.
that I've been holding on to. I mean, completely like I bear a lot of that responsibility in our physical intimacy in the bedroom because of my own pride and holding on to stuff for too long. But also, and I think, and one of those things is holding on to all the stuff that I should have just laid out way before you get to that bitterness point. Do you know what I mean? Where you're just like, ah, like, so just don't. And I think that's the beautiful thing about being coaches and being mentoring is we can fast track you. I tell people this all the time, like TJ and Morgan, I'm 20 years older than them. Okay. And they're about year 4 into marriage, and his little brother. And it's like, look, you don't have to go through some of the stuff that we've gone through. Like, this is a beautiful thing about having mentors and understanding the importance of having mentors. And like what happened for us here recently is we didn't have mentors there for a little while.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, what's missing here? Well, we don't have accountability and mentors. Like
in that particular area, maybe we've had them in business, or we've had them in different things.
But as an accountability couple, that we actually are either like they're above us.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. I say this all the time, and people think I'm being boastful.
Out of humility.
Maybe. Out of humility, because just me personally, talk to me about me personally, is I have to do the extra reps. So I intentionally make myself be really, really have wisdom and knowledge and just grow myself daily. And so it's hard for us to find people who are ahead of us, because I'm trying to every day reconcile, be better, right?
Yes.
So, but we did.
Yes.
And it's really
we made an investment, without going too crazy, because I want to stay on topic, because we could really make this a long one. But we the best investment you'll ever make is in yourself. And when I look at people who I find men, especially entrepreneurs, who they go out and they can be so focused on the business, on earning income. And I say this in my book that making a bunch of money and in the process ending up divorced and your kids don't know who you are is not success. That is the ultimate failure, in my opinion. And it's so when we can have the right alignment, priorities, if you will, of God, family, then business, I think things line up. And so many times, when the marriage isn't right, when there's not sex, when there's not certain things in the marriage, nothing else really matters. When we're not in alignment and we're not gelling, it really doesn't matter what's happening in your ministry or my businesses, or how much money we got, or that you got this type of vehicle you drive, or we live in this kind of house, or we went on this vacation. Like, it just doesn't matter. Life really sucks when your marriage isn't on point. I think that's why we have such a passion to share with people and to fast track people because of that.
And one of those fast track things I can help people with too is like, you're not God. You're not responsible for changing him. You can't change him. You can only change yourself. Like, you are in God's way. Like, get out of his way and just go and worry about yourself, grow yourself, and pray for your husband. And that's one of those things that I also know people don't know what they don't know. In my almost 20 years now walking with Jesus, like,
sure,
it's not a known thing to pray for your spouse, like, or they just quit praying because of whatever. I just heard that recently too. Well, I just kind of have quit praying. I'm like, well, Jesus says with shameless audacity, that we keep doing it.
Yeah. There consistency. Like I said earlier, or anything worth doing, is worth doing consistently, right? So why do we work out every single day? Somebody asked me that the other day. I don't understand. You work out every day. I'm like, every day. Yeah. Why? Because I want to take care of my body, right? You spend time with Jesus every single morning. It's why I journal and for the last 12 or 13 years. So we started. So I had mentioned to you one day, let's talk about this sex challenge, if you will, for you couples out there. As I said to you, well, babe, as we're setting these boundaries, as we're talking about how we can go next level, I said, well, we work out every day. We spend time with Jesus every day. We brush our teeth every day. We eat, we do all these things. Why don't we just have sex every day? Like, why don't we just flip our mindset? And instead of, I don't care that this person has sex once a week, once a month, what everybody else is,
Mhm.
the way they do it. I care about our marriage. I care about what are the things that we need to set in our marriage that are going to help us be our very best. And I said, why don't we just have sex every day? And, if occasionally, just one night you're just like, hey, I really don't feel it, then I'll be respectful of that. And I'll say, hey, no problem. We'll take the night off. Right. Just like every once in a while, you might need a day off from working out. Right. You might need, to whatever. And so we said, all right, let's do it. And that was
It
a
was
game
twice
changer.
a day there for
That
a
was
little.
that was a game changer. And let's be real. A lot of you men out there, maybe in our younger days, we might want to brag a little bit, but do you really need a half an hour or an hour? No.
But they're
You,
pretty, they're at
okay.
least.
But listen, but my point is that in 10 minutes of sneaking away, 15 minutes, you would have the ability to be intimate, with each other, and to be able to make this a part of your marriage that will be so beneficial for both. I mean, there's so many, just go look up, the benefits of sex, when it comes to oxytocin, when it comes to dopamine release, when it comes to all the things that are happening in the human body, when sex is happening, and all those different
It's good.
things.
It's good for you. It's healthy for you. We actually got a hotel room last weekend because that was our first when we decided to have sex, and it ended up being like twice a day because our kids are home. We're like, our parents are up in the bedroom again, like so.
Yeah.
We
And,
just got a hotel room and it was amazing.
and it was a place that we had wanted to stay at, or I'd want to stay at, for years,
Yeah.
on the riverbank of Cincinnati at the Radisson, and eat dinner at
The
the
restaurant
18th
spins around. It's
floor.
pretty
And
cool.
so, every once in a while, men, you don't have to do it all the time, but, get away, take a trip away,
It
go
was
to
awesome.
a place. One of the things that we prioritize a lot in our marriage is generally every 90 days we go somewhere, right? At the end of the year, we do a marriage retreat for each other for 2 or 3 days so that we can plan out our next year's goals and things of that nature. So I want to keep this episode not too crazy.
Are we gonna talk boundaries? Or no?
So, let's talk about boundaries and tie it together.
Okay.
What's one way that a husband and wife that are listening to this, or maybe it's, husbands listen, or wife, and you want to share this episode with your spouse. But what's one way that, what's one of the boundaries that you would say that we've kind of implemented or talked about that's been a game changer for us? And then I would just recommend getting the book,
The
Boundaries in
yeah.
Marriage. You know what I mean? Because it is a game changer that you have to be willing to grow, friends, and to invest. Whether that's buying a book and reading it together, that's going to a marriage retreat, that's investing in a coach. You know what I mean? I can't think of anything other than your marriage. I mean, you invest in your body, you invest in a 401k, you invest in whatever, but oh my gosh, when I see people that end up, in a position of divorce, and all this money is spent, and it's the death of a family, of a community.
You need people to walk with you.
It doesn't have to be that way.
And fast track you.
Yeah.
So I just think about, but first of all, boundaries are God's idea. If you think about, he created boundaries in the beginning. There's a distinct boundary between land and water. There's a distinct boundary between, the atmospheres, whatever. And so, as far as boundary goes, so boundaries are things that we have set for ourselves, right? And so we have boundary lines around our property. Like, this is clearly my boundary line. That's clearly their boundary line. And you do have gates, though, that you can let in and out. And so for me personally, a boundary that I set was just some negative talk, like friends, we have to teach people how to treat us, right? Especially if you have had a major transformation in the people in your life, they just never reconciled you. And so you have to really create boundaries there and teach them how to treat you. So for me, the boundary was more of things that I wasn't going to allow anymore. And that was just lack of us both growing, like leveling up in our personal everything. The biggest thing was our marriage and prioritizing that back. And
Yes.
just how
Because we
just
were always growing,
yeah,
but when you were running multiple businesses and kids and
yeah,
finances and ministry and all these things, the enemy is sly, friends. And if you're married, it can very easily, your eye can be taken off the ball, and you can be focused on so many different things, spinning so many
yeah.
plates. But there's one plate that you never want to drop, in my opinion, and it's your
It's your
marriage.
marriage.
It's your
Yeah.
marriage. You know what I mean? I mean, when a marriage is destroyed, it literally destroys a village, your kids. It affects your relationships,
Dreams.
your church, your dreams. There's
Yeah.
so many different things where it really needs to become a focus. And I would say for us, it's just that was a boundary that was set, was that, hey, we both realize we need to spend more time focused on each other,
Yeah.
asking each other, how do
And
you
it's
feel
been so
loved?
amazing, the fruit just over the last almost 3 weeks now, the fruit that's happening, and where the energy in our home and where we're headed with businesses and programs and books and just us working together again and being home together again. And it's
Yes.
like, if you asked me a couple months ago, I'd been like, hell to the no. But now I'm so excited to be able to have that life back, that you home and me home, and we're building stuff from home, and we are together all the time, and
Yes.
our kids see us together all the time, and it's just an amazing thing. And I was telling him earlier, we're an amazing team. I'm like the one that just like moves, and
Shoot, ready,
I'm
aim.
shoot ready aim, and then he comes eventually. And but I'm like, if we were the same, like about 10 minutes before we recorded this, I'm like, well, let's just go get this handled right now. So I was starting to like undress
I was
him, and
like,
he's
no, we
like,
got work to do.
I was like, what?
I said, did I just turn you down?
What just
Yes, I
happened?
did.
Anyways, but I'm like, I'm thankful that's why we're an amazing team, because if we were both alike, we would get nothing done. Anyways, so
That's
yeah.
right. So I think, let's just talk about that one boundary is, to make a decision today, friends, especially in your marriage. If you're listening to this and you're a married couple, or maybe you're gonna be married soon, or your desire is someday to be married, that, trust me, this is something that you will be able to implement into your life, into your marriage, that will 100% be a game changer, that I wish that we would have known years ago, right?
Mhm.
And so make a decision today to talk about these things, to set a boundary, saying that, look, a boundary that says that our marriage is going to be first and foremost,
Mhm.
before our jobs, before the kids. What are the things that we need to do to take our marriage to the next level? How do you feel loved? Answer that one question. We'll just leave you with that today. Ask your spouse the question, how do they feel loved? Like, one thing Rachel and I will say is, hey, I feel loved when you fill in the blank, right? I said this to you last night, hey, when you prepare a salad for me before dinner, I feel loved. Just something so small like that. I
Mhm.
feel loved when you give me that word of encouragement
Mhm.
before I head out
And
the
I just,
door for a meeting.
before we end this, I just want to leave this with you, is the perfect marriage in God's eyes is two servant spouses. And so I talked earlier about where your focus was. And then, like, and I'm just in that place in my life right now, like, in the Matthew 6:33 says, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And what that means is I just have to yield my life to my assignment. I'm dying every single day. I'm laying down my life, and I serve every single person I come in contact. That's what seek first the kingdom means. And then all these things will be added. And it starts in my own home. And so, yeah, I can see, like, I'm actually better now, but when I walk around the house and I'm picking up things that for the 50th time a day, and and I could go in that space, but I'm like, no, what a blessing that I still have this to do, and to be a servant and not complain about it, but actually, now I'm actually like, because that's just who I am. I want to glorify the Lord, so I want to do it as unto him. So
Mm.
now I just do it, even move in the car every single morning so that I can leave.
That's right. Because our son parks behind her.
He parks
Yeah.
behind me, and I stop parking behind me so that I can leave. I don't have to get out and move your car and then get back in my car. But
That's what happens when you have kids who are teenagers with cars
but
and
my point
too many cars.
is you have to. I don't do it perfect all the time, but I do know better. And that's different when you know better, because I'm like, okay, all these things I'm going to learn to put to practice. I'm like, you know what? Let's reframe that. What a blessing it is
I love
that I get to do this.
So here's your challenge, friends. Set the boundary of putting your marriage first. All right, putting each other first. No,
Come on.
putting. She wants me to show our dog
is
Maverick. He's
Mav.
making his first
He's a
episode
lion.
appearance.
Look.
For those of you who aren't on
He's a
YouTube, check it out.
lion.
He's an 8-pound Yorkie poo
He's a lion.
with a lion suit on.
Tell him.
So anyhow, friends, listen. Set a boundary today. Set the boundary to put each other first in your marriage, to begin to start having open talk, safe talk, and yes, have more sex.
Have more sex.
Have more sex. And listen, shoot us a message on this episode, friends. We're here. You can find us both on Facebook or Instagram at, Rachel Tucker or Curt Tucker. And we would love, to share with you more on what we have coming up, this next month. Stay tuned for that in June, where we're going to be talking about the champion wife, which is going to be pretty awesome, and some of the stuff that we're launching in our marriage thing. So it's going to be pretty cool. So stay tuned for that. But hey, guys, thank you so much for tuning in with us on this episode. And we look forward to seeing you back on the next one. And until then, keep moving forward towards creating that champion life that God has for you, a life of abundance, freedom, and victory in every area. And we'll talk to you guys soon. God bless. See ya.